Welcome back to Burn the Ship, the podcast where we connect entrepreneurs to professionals to help you go all in on your business. I'm your host, Ezra Brown. Without further ado, I'm going to allow my guest to introduce himself.
Hey, I'm Robert Fordham. I own and operate ImproMech LLC, which is a play on words from improving mechanical design. Is kind of where the company started. Is we tried to take issues that we found in the school bus realm, particularly, and figure out a way to make better products to fix people's issues. And so now we've kind of morphed into a couple of different things, but our core business is working with AC install companies that are installing aftermarket air conditionings in brand new school buses for different school systems and sales for. We specialize in Bluebird International, and we've done a little bit for some Freightliner buses, but we basically have found our core business where we help these installers improve some of the designs and the headaches that they have with installations, and being able to design and then bring those designs to a manufacturing process and then actually manufacture them for the customer. And so
that's awesome, and that's very they always say if you want to get rich, you got to find a problem and solve it. And I can tell you right now, growing up riding the big cheese, I can tell you there wasn't great AC in the buses, 15 years ago when I was riding them all the time, 10 years ago. But no, I definitely think it's really interesting what you guys do. Especially, I've never met somebody that does what you guys do at ImproMech. It's very specific. But no, tell me kind of how did you get started in that? Was there like an idea before? What did you do in entrepreneurship before this, or did you just hop right into this?
All right. Well, backstory is I'm a farm boy by birth, and got out of school, always learned to mechanic, and as things happen in life, we tried to get in a farm for a number of people for a number of years, and then tried to get into it ourselves, and it did pretty well for us for a few years, and then we probably landed one of the dry years that it basically put us out of business. And so we were small back then, and I had a wife and small kids, so you do what you got to do. You go get a job.
Right, absolutely.
And because of my mechanicing background, it just so happened one of the local school systems was needing a shop foreman for the school bus shop. So I went in and started working for the local school system, and I found a lot of things with the school buses where on the farm, you always, if you had an issue, you just figured out how to fix your issue and you made it. And
exactly.
So I kind of carried that mentality into the school bus realm, and long story short, I worked about 19 years with the school bus, in the school bus industry, and probably about 10 years in, I just got tired of some of the products we were seeing that we were having to constantly replace. I had some friends that were in manufacturing, and I said, "Hey, I'm gonna design this. Can you make it for me?" And they said, "Sure." So I drew up all the plans. I had done some drafting when I was in high school and all, so I knew a little bit about how to draw up plans, and so I drew up all the plans, and the guys started producing them for our local school system, and I had a great staff and all there that allowed me to do some of this, and so I started making them through those, and I had a couple of different designs that we were making just for the school system. Long story short is that one day Georgia Tech used to have an entrepreneurial program where they had people that would go around and visit small businesses and help them to grow and to do different things. Well, one of the guys was visiting the small manufacturing business that I was dealing with at the time, and happened to have one of my products sitting on his desk one day because he was working on some stuff for me. And he said, "What is this?" And he told him a little bit about my story. And the guy said, "I got to go meet him." So he actually left that day, brought him to meet me. We had a 2 hours conversation, and he said, I'm going to come see you in 6 months. I want a business with I want you to go ahead and get your LLC formed. And he gave me several things that he wanted me to do. And so I took him at his word, and I went and did it. And we had run farms, and so I was familiar with business, and
Right.
I'd never, manufacturing was something completely different. I have a background in mechanicking, fabricating, welding. I had a background in all of it, so I knew I'm a jack of all trades and really probably the master of none. But
I say that all the time. I love that quote.
Yeah, and it's because I'm really good on the technical side. I can talk intelligently from anything from computers to welding to plastics to, but my knowledge of it's just kind of shallow, but I know enough to get by. And so I used that to basically start trying to figure out how I could make some products. So I got in, had my first product, tried to go sell a few things. Companies look at people with one product in this field. You got one product. No, we're not going to do much there with you. So I had a hard time trying to get people to pick me up. And so I kept hearing over and over, well, you need more products. So I said, okay, well, I'll start trying. There's a bunch of other products I know didn't have issues. So I started just trying to figure out different issues, trying to come up with products. And in the business realm, a lot of people think you have a great idea and you can just get it done, and all of a sudden it magically starts selling. But your great idea may be the worst idea to somebody else.
Right, absolutely.
And so trying to find ideas that actually were feasible that somebody else wanted to pay money for. That's kind of the hard part of it. And I knew what worked at our shop and what we needed there, but come to find out sometimes that wasn't what another shop needed. So I started trying to just kind of visit shops, and one of the things I would always just ask, I said, what is your issues? What are the problems that you're having? And so they would start just naming me a laundry list off of them. And I would try to kind of jot down, and anything I kind of saw in common that I thought, was possibly that we could do, and in the beginning, you end up investing a lot of time and money in things that don't go nowhere.
Right, absolutely. Because I'm a year and a half into my book of business, so I definitely understand that very, very much so. Because I definitely wasted 6 months doing diddly, It was productive, but it was productive at the time. But now I look back on it, I'm like, what in the heck was I doing for that time?
That's right. And I think it's all like a learning process. And so, because there's just so much to know and understand. I've never been a marketing guy. And so trying to understand what other people are interested in, because basically a business tries to create value for somebody else.
Right.
And you have to find a value that enough people are willing to pay for, that you in turn can make enough profit off of.
Absolutely.
To stay in business. And, I'd always heard these concepts, and these concepts intuitively, but trying to make that work out and actually work is a lot different. And so it was kind of it was a big learning process in the beginning. I kept working at the school system, so I didn't just take off and, so I kept working through. We come up with probably 5, 6, 7, 8 products. And one of the things I've learned is the better marketer you are in those type deals, that's the easiest way to move yourself forward. And one of my Achilles heels is we started the company, and I named it ImproMech because the idea was we improve mechanical design. And one of my core concepts was I was never going to take on anything that I could not improve in some way other than just financially, because I wasn't, I'd started reading back then and stuff. So I'd read, Blue Ocean Strategy, where, trying to be able to figure out how you are not constantly dwelling in competition and so that you can do something different.
Right.
And in trying to find those products that we could, that was different, that we could make, was a tough challenge. And I worked at it for a number of years. Business never really did a whole lot. And it's always interesting to me in business. Probably one of the biggest things you can always do is network. And
Oh yeah, big time, massive networker over here.
right, well, because you can actually have the best product with the best idea, but not get it in front of the right people, and it doesn't go anywhere. And
1,000,000%.
that's something that's hard for people to understand sometimes, because um everybody should like my idea, but most of the time that's not the way it works out. You've got to get it in front of the right people, uh, and sometimes just the right connection. So for me, there was a guy that had actually been coming to was owned his own business. He run a parts business, and so he come and met with me at the school multiple times, and he sold us parts and all. Me and him kind of hit it off, and I always would make the connection when he'd come down. We'd always get to talk, and we talk about business stuff, and we would go through things. Well, I never could get any traction with my business, and probably 3 or 4 years in, I was just kind of floundering around, not really going anywhere. And that guy happened to sell his business and go and was a product manager over the parts side for a much larger business here in Georgia. And so I called him one day and I said, what have I got to do to try to get some of these parts in there? And he basically told me, he said, look, I've known you for a long time. He said, I trust you. He said, I'll give you a shot. And he got me in the door, and things didn't go that great to start with. And a lot of people say, I found sometimes you've got to pick a direction and run with it.
Right.
Until either another direction makes itself available.
Right.
And I just kept running hard at it like that. And what I would do is they would call me and they say, well, hey, we've got this shop that's kept saying they having this problem, would you go look at it? I said, sure. Yeah, whatever. I'll take off. And so I looked at it, and I don't even remember if that job, I just actually says, well, this is what you need to do. You don't need anything from me. This is what needs to happen here to straighten this out. And but that introduced me to one of their AC guys that run the AC department. And then I started getting phone calls from him. Hey, we've got this issue. Hey, we've got this issue. And I started having to try to figure out how to fix multiple issues. And then I'm not, I have a high school education. I went to tech school for diesel mechanic. But I don't really, other than that, I had never really dealt with any of this kind of stuff before. So I was constantly, how do you figure out, I'm not a design guy. And they would start asking me, he says, how do you design? What software program do you use to design this stuff? I said, it's very, very technical. It's called pencil and paper.
Right.
I would actually draw out, I would spend hours doing a drafting sketch of my projects. Right. And I said, so there's got to be a way to speed this up. And so I started reading a bunch of books like Tim Ferriss' 4-Hour Work Week, and trying to find how do you get more efficient? How do you speed things up? How do you hire people when you don't have money to hire people? How do you get things done when you need it done as cheaply as possible? And so I started learning out what Fiverr was, Upwork, and so I had an interesting way I went about doing it. I basically would go on to Fiverr, and I would make a set of instructions, and I would pick 3 people that I thought could do the job that I needed them to do. And then I would
Right.
send all three of them the exact same set of instructions and the exact same set. And then I would see how they responded to me,
Mm-hmm.
what questions they asked, and then how the product ended up. Because a lot of these guys were really good at what they do, but I found our communication always wasn't the best. And so I
Right.
tried to find people that I could communicate well with. And
Right,
so
which is smart because I mean I know tons of bookkeepers on that we network with or that are in our books of business that that's kind of how they comp out their work, Fiverr stuff like that, and it's one of those things where I haven't really heard somebody say that they kind of really they didn't. It's like it's almost like you vetted them out, but you didn't, but you weren't fully vetting them out. You're just making sure that it was the right fit for your business, and that's
right.
super smart.
Well, that's the thing that I found. A lot of times people are really good at what they do,
Mm-hmm.
but if you can't communicate well with them and you have to spend more time communicating with them what you want done, then
Right.
that's just time and money lost. And,
Absolutely.
and so trying to find, when all of these were probably great at what they did, it was the one that me and them just kind of hit it off. And I actually
Right.
found like an engineer in Egypt of all places. And the guy he was really reasonable on his pricing. And a lot of times I would sketch up everything, send him the file that afternoon. And then sometimes he would have it because their time work day is during our middle of our night. So,
Right.
because they're 12 hours behind us. And he would send it back in the morning. So I would send it at night and have the CAD drawings at all first
Right.
thing uh, the next morning. And so I figured out, how to kind of get that done and then trying to figure out all the different manufacturing processes, which I am uh, is partially part of my Achilles heel, but I am uh, a continual learner, but I'm extremely curious. So a lot of times the way I say it is I'm eternally curious and a continual learner. And part of that is that so I started learning about manufacturing processes. And so if I can get you a drawing of what I want to do, and then I can figure out the process, then I could have it done. Then I would try to find people that could manufacture the parts that I wanted. And
Right.
it's amazing to me that once you start digging around, there's niche businesses everywhere that you'll never hear of. They're small.
Yep.
They may be anywhere from $500,000 to $3 million business, which
Right.
won't make any headlines, but they got 3 or 4 people and they're really in a very niche market and they're really good
Absolutely.
at what they do. And so trying to find those different businesses to approach the different products. And so I was always like, okay, how can I do this different? Can we make this out of plastic? Okay, I know how a laser torrent punch press works. I know how press brakes work. Okay, how do they bend plastic? And
Right.
there's niche operations out there that you think you just heat plastic and bend it. Well, they actually can do it tighter bends by using a CNC router to V-groove it out and then be able
Mm-hmm.
to make the bend and then just gluing it back together. And
Right.
so finding these opportunities out there and these different businesses and being able to work and partner with them, it's been crazy fun. Uh, I wish I could say it's always crazy profitable, but it's just, you learn more through your failures than you'll ever learn through the things that are just happen right. You know,
Absolutely.
some of the biggest, some of the biggest wins we've had were on projects that guy called me and said, "Hey, we need this done." I was like, "Okay, yeah." Says this is never going to go anywhere,
Mm-hmm.
and I do not want to spend time and effort and money because you know, end up spending, uh, which happened a lot in the beginning. You'd end up spending 30, 40, 50 hours, and then you'd end up making $500, and it's like,
Right.
okay, that's not good return on your investment here, you know.
Absolutely. Yeah. No. Absolutely.
And so take a project come in and I says that's not gonna work, you're not gonna be able to sell that, the customer base you're looking at is too tight wadded. That's just out of their ballpark.
Right.
I said, you're talking about a comfort item and they're not going to spend the money. I deal with a lot of school systems and government. So there's things they don't spend money on. And it doesn't matter how good a product it is, they're just not going to spend the money.
It could be the best. It could be the best thing since sliced bread, and they still ain't going to put it out there.
Right. Well, I mean, there's school systems out there that will buy different buses, and the bids will be less than $10 apart, and they go with the lowest bid.
Yeah, and what do you expect off that?
Right. And so you deal with customers like that. And then that come through. I says, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to make some money off of it. Here's the price. If you want to do it, great. If not, fine. And ended up being one of our biggest sellers. And it's just like, you just don't never know. It's so hard to learn your market. And that's I've seen people that are very, very good at that. And I wish that's a skill. I think that's a skill you can develop, but it takes a lot to try to understand your market so that you understand what'll sell in that market. And so, because sometimes it's just surprising.
Has your market, because you've been in your market for a while, especially being around the bus industry before you even started doing the manufacturing side, what would you say? Would you say that y'all have like I feel like buses have changed significantly over the last 10 years.
There's parts of school buses that have changed immensely, but there's parts that haven't changed a bit. To give you an example, Bluebird school buses.
That's the only thing we have here in our county. And we're in Paulding County, Georgia, so we're not too far from Cobb County, and it's all Bluebird buses.
Right, and I'm in Bleckley County, which is not far from Fort Valley, where Bluebirds.
Yeah. I know exactly where you're at. I went to school in South Georgia, so.
I got you. Middle Georgia College is big here.
Oh yeah.
So the body structural frame of a Bluebird school bus, the conventional bus, which is with a hood on the front of it, not a flat nose,
not the old smush face.
That basic body design hasn't changed in 30 years.
Right.
It's the structural part of it. They've the bows, the way they do some of the sheet metal. They've updated little bitty things here and there, and so, but it's a good solid design, and so they kind of stick with that. Now the electronic side of it, DEF fluid, SCR systems, all your emission systems that diesels have been put on is a mechanic's nightmare at the moment. And so it's something that is created. There are those that learn it and do well with it. The sky's the limit, because things that are hard for everybody, then that's what they're willing to pay for somebody to fix. So it's kind of a blessing for mechanics, but it's also their headache. So that part has changed a lot. And give you an example, moving from, if you went back, I don't know how long it's been, probably in the 70s, 80s, there was actually some old gas school buses, manuals and stuff like that. Then gas has come back. So now I think Bluebird is one of their bigger productions moving towards gas and propane. And the reason simply is the price of maintaining a diesel with a lot of the new systems on it. You can take a turbo. A turbo is basically a wear item on a bus. Once you start hitting 6,000 to 10,000 hours, that's if it hadn't went out before then, it's going out, and that's a $4,000 item without just parts. And then EGR valves, SCR systems, all of those, the amount of money it costs to maintain that is greatly starting to outweigh even what you could rebuild a gas engine for. And so
absolutely.
And so now,
especially how much advanced they've made gas engines over the last 15 years, it's kind of unreal.
Right. I mean, people, it's always, we always want to, how should you say, we always want to make the past seem better than what it actually was.
Right.
But I remember when, I'm not that old, but I was even mechanic when I was little, and having to file points, having to change spark plugs every 15, 20,000 miles, because if you didn't have the carburetor set right, you fouled them out, and nowadays there's a lot of, if you change the oil and all in it, there's cars going 150, 200,000 miles with not having to touch them. And so that industry has changed dramatically with
Right.
computerization and stuff like that. And so,
Absolutely, because they self-diagnose themselves nowadays. You,
yeah,
you get that you get that electronic scan on the front. You need to service your vehicle. You
yeah,
know, it's none of the girls my age and a little younger than me when we was in college. You know, they ride around 10,000 miles over an oil change. I'm like, if I did that, my car would blow up. You know?
that's right. Right. So there's a lot of things that have changed, and all markets are changing, and it's imperative on business owners that, I get it. I know how nice it is. It's just to do one thing and be able to do it over and over and over and get really
Right.
good at doing it over and over and over.
Right.
But it, if you look at the major shifts in the world now, I mean, we have major changes every 5 to 7 years, like huge
Right.
major shifts. And so you, in the vehicle realm, there's constantly, uh, we always make the joke that they have to change something so they can justify their job. But, with regulations and constantly trying to improve technology, there's always going to be these changes going on in the industry, and just trying to keep up a lot of times can be tough. And so as a business owner, if you find something that works, great, put that on autopilot, but you better be working on the next thing and
Mm-hmm.
trying to figure out what that next thing is, because that's going away. Uh,
Right. You're gonna be left in the dust if you don't find it.
that's right. One of the things I had done early in my business, I was trying to learn the market side of it. And
Right.
nowadays, if you don't have some kind of internet presence or, e-commerce, it's tough to make it. We're
Right.
mostly a B2B business,
Mm-hmm.
and I've never grown as far as my school bus stuff, I've never grown it to the e-commerce side the way I've really wanted to. One
Mm-hmm.
thing is we deal with a lot of schools and, government entities, and government
Right.
entities have been slow about adopting where you're just full on ordering off the internet. It's been a lot
Right.
better in the last few years, but uh, 10 years ago, there were school systems that never ordered anything off the internet,
Right. Absolutely. Just because of that traditional way of that they've always done things, and I
Right.
guess it's a better trail for them, essentially, more or less.
Well, it was always a headache to go through and set up a new vendor and then go through the problems of getting, no government entity is going to give you access to a credit card just to spend willy nilly. You've got to go through the PO process. You've got to go through the
Mm-hmm.
purchasing process. And usually you're not the purchasing agent, somebody above you is. And so it's just a
Right.
lot of rigmarole for a lot of them. So they set up a vendor and they just deal with their vendors. And
Absolutely.
and as long as their vendors are supplying reasonable pricing and doing a reasonable job for them, they don't change because it's too
Absolutely.
big of a headache. So
Right.
that's good and bad. Is once you get in to be one of those vendors, as long as you do what you're supposed to be doing, then you keep customers. But
Right.
uh, but so early on, I was trying to figure out that, and back then the Amazon hype was huge, and I says, well, if nothing else, I need to figure out how to get my stuff on Amazon. So if nothing else, I'll have, maybe some just eyeballs see my stuff.
Right.
Try to get it out there, because the search algorithms and everything, if you search anything, they got it on Amazon, it always pops up.
Right.
And so I said, I need to try to figure this out. And I spent, at the time, the business was kind of at a lull. We were not doing a whole lot of new stuff. We were just kind of keeping what we're doing. It wasn't a ton of business going on. So I took some time and tried to learn Amazon. And I said, well, I'm going to try to learn this, but I don't want this. I'd heard horror stories, and I said, I don't want this to mess up my business. So I'm actually going to try to do this under something different. And so if it messes up, it doesn't affect my business, you know.
Right.
So, crazy thing is I spent like 3 months trying to figure it out. Went through a bunch of processes, started, and I just started on some random stuff, hardware of all things. Actually, was doing the leveling feet and stuff that go on the bottom of like furniture and chairs and stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah,
And people think, okay, what the heck is that? Well,
yeah.
within a year and a half, I built revenue to about $350,000,
Dang.
and it was extremely interesting just to learn that process. And but the reason
Right.
I bring it up is that all those fast forward, all those I come up with some new product ideas that nobody was doing, and it took about 2.5 years for people to catch up.
Right.
But once they did, they like bottomed out my sales on those items. So those items would go from selling 400, 450 sales a month and went to 10 sales a month.
Right.
Because, and then you would go on there, and I was one of the first in that realm to do. Basically, it was just a different color. I just used a
Right.
different color, and that nobody else was using. I found a supplier on it, and this, that, and other, and they just took off and sold. Now, when you do the searches, everybody's
Everybody's got
knocking
that.
you off. And the thing is what was interesting. I would go to Alibaba, and they
Yeah.
were using my pictures off my Amazon account on Alibaba to resell those
Really?
products. Yeah.
No way.
Yeah, it was like crazy. And that I make that point, it is just to go back to reiterate the point again that, nothing stays constant. You've got to be constantly trying to improve and get better, do something different. And so that's kind of, I bounced around for a while because a lot of times in business, people think I have seen some business be so extremely focused. They just like, man, they get it done. And then like most of the time my business has been, okay, run into a brick wall, stumble backwards and trip over something. And you
Right.
fall in the middle of it. And that just happens
Absolutely.
to be the way it is. And you just got to pick it up and run with it. And so,
Absolutely. That's the definition of success. You gotta, the failure. I mean, success. The definition of it to me is you got to get up one more time than you fall.
that's
You
right.
know, 'cause
Well,
for the last time you fall, hopefully it's that last time and you get to go see the good Lord up above.
that's right. And it's, well, I've often, said that, retirement for me, I reckon I have a different mentality. Retirement is for me is when I come by and get viewed, that's kind of my idea of it. And it's just, I want to be doing something that I get some kind of enjoyment from or some kind of fulfillment from,
Right.
and usually that has to do with pushing yourself harder and accomplishing something that you didn't think you could do.
Right.
And
Absolutely. Completely agree. Because the fulfillment you get on that is more than making whatever amount of money you make. Because it's just that internal fulfillment. Money don't fill you I mean, some people I guess it could, but money's not a filler of happiness. It's successfully doing things you say you're going to do.
that's right. And everybody defines success slightly differently. Uh, one of my probably one of my downfalls is that I'm not really focused around money. I've never really been. When I first started business, I didn't know how to price anything, and
Right.
I was naive in the idea that everybody thinks everybody's ripping you off and they're
Yeah.
charging 100% a markup and they're charging all these exuberant markups, and this is a $5 part and they're selling it for $100.
Yep.
And as you get into business, you find out that's not the way it really works. I listen to a lot of like Alex Ramosi and,
Yeah. Yeah.
a lot of these guys, and their cost of acquisition of sales is like
Mm-hmm.
crazy to me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm more on the wholesale side where I'm selling bulk. So,
Right.
trying to make somewhere between a 30 and a 70% markup on
Yeah.
products. And if I can make 100% markup, that's like, that's like crazy good, but
Right.
they're talking about doing like 300% markup. But then you look at their cost of acquisition, you know, uh, a third of that markup is their cost of acquisition, what it takes to reach to make one sale. So they may have $1 in a part, but they may have $2 in trying to sell that part.
Absolutely, because they're paying somebody a salary, a $40,000 salary to sell that product for them, but they have that product that costs them nothing. You know
Right.
what I mean?
Right. And saying that's the thing. And people just you don't understand that in the beginning. You think well, I'm ripping somebody off or something like that. And you don't understand overhead. That is, once you start, when you're working by yourself,
Yeah.
you don't really count your time and you're like, oh, this is great. And, I put in 80 hours this week and you just see a check where you brought in
Yeah.
something you may have been working on for 3 months and it's $10,000 and you're like excited about that. But when you start breaking that down, it's like, okay, that was a lot of work and I
Right.
could probably went and worked a regular job and made more money than that.
Right. Right, absolutely. But it's that trial and error learning though.
Right.
For you, as soon as you started ImproMech, you didn't have that entrepreneur background, but you knew what it took to be successful.
Right. And
So once you learn, you got to learn as you go.
that's right. And that's what I tell people is you can, I am the world's worst about having to learn things for myself, but it's much easier to talk with people and learn from them.
No, 1,000,000%. You know what I mean? I don't want to open the book, but I'll sit there and take advice and pick your brain as long as I can sit there and have that conversation with you. But you get me to open up and start reading page one. That's the hardest thing for me to do.
That's right. That's right. Because I mean, it's, I reckon it's human nature to want to do something as fast, especially when you don't have an interest in something. And, 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 I was raised by, my parents always taught me, you always do the right thing no matter what. And
Right.
you're always trying to help people. So a lot of times in business, I kind of applied some of those principles and it took me years to figure out, okay, I'm helping people, but one person I'm not helping is myself.
Right.
Because in the end, I started doing as you learn to do more cost analysis and you're trying to understand. And as you start hiring people, that's when you really have to start figuring out, okay, if I'm going to hire somebody and I'm going to keep them a job, I have to make sure they have enough work to do. And then the work that they're doing is profitable for them to do so that I can continue to pay them.
Right.
And once you start having to take on insurance, you're taking on warehouse, you're taking on, electric bills, internet bills, keeping up computers, you don't think about that, but those are all costs that have to come out of your bottom line. So
Hmm.
if your margins are not large enough to accompany for that, you can find yourself working for long periods of time and not make any money.
Right. Yeah, you can work for
Basically,
a net zero on a net 90 job.
right. I remember seeing a guy that he throwed up everything that he had. He was doing over $1 million in revenue. Was only probably, he said he's making somewhere between 70 and 75,000 a year off of it, but he worked 80 plus hours a week. And you
Go
know,
be a school teacher.
yeah. And it's like, if you really enjoy that,
Right.
great.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
most people, it's hard to calculate those costs. And early in business, that can put you out of business. And one of the things, it kind of sounds bad to say, when it comes out of your mouth, but you really have to figure out what is the value of your product. And you can't
Right.
compare that to what the cost of your product is.
Right.
What problem are you solving? What are people willing to pay for that? And
Hmm.
then go back and look, okay, if I can solve that problem, if I can get that X amount, if I can get $100 out of it,
Right.
what would I have to manufacture that for?
Hmm.
To not only cover, you got to think about uh, how many of your employees messed up? Are they 100% accurate 100% of the time? No, no employee will be. You know, I've got to have X amount of space and I'm paying rental on this amount of space, and I will only keep that space useful for 40% of the time. Well,
Right.
who's going to pay for it the rest of the other 60%? If you don't have
Mm-hmm.
anything to do it, that job has to pay for the whole 100% of it. And
Mm-hmm.
uh it's not you being greedy over stuff. It's just knowing the math. And
Right. Absolutely.
and a lot of times I think that's hard for a lot of people is they don't. I've seen a lot of small business owners, they don't know the math. And I would be lying to say that I always knew the math of every one of mine, but
Right.
it's hard to sometimes try to understand fully, you know, how do you pay that rent on that warehouse, and then how you divide it up to make sure it's being covered between everything you got going on. You know,
Right.
where does that overhead come from? And, you know, then having to do, I won't never forget a friend of mine run a small business. The first year he run, he said, I made $100,000 and I put $100,000 in my pocket, and I went and did my taxes, and they wanted me to write a check for $35,000. And nobody had ever explained to him anything about, you know, taxes, how to you know, what are the things that you can do to negate some of the taxes, how you can spend the money. Ultimately, you can't negate all taxes. If you're going to make any
Right.
money, you're going to pay taxes. But
Oh yeah, they gonna get you.
yeah, but if you're not accounting for that, you know, so I made $100,000 this year, and then you go back and do the math. Well, 35% of that profit is gone
Yeah, you
because
made
you didn't have any.
65K.
Yeah. And so then you start dividing that back out, and you're like, wow, that probably was not worth the effort that I put in for that. You know,
Right, absolutely. And I've grown up around people with businesses, friends own businesses. Been, the business I work in is owned by my dad's best friend. So I grew up around it. My dad's in the car world, so I've seen it tons. My granddad was in HVAC, and it's one of those things. My granddad had ate my granddad up. That same thing. Just not having that knowledge on that background of really, or having anybody around him kind of be like, hey man, this is what you need to be doing. You have a really successful business, but if you don't do this, you're gonna be floating a job in 6 months if you don't do this.
that's right. That's right. And it's like, it's trying to understand that. And that's the hard thing about business to me is, you know, once you reach a certain size and you can pay for a full-time controller, financial controller to come in and manage that.
Right.
And then once you get certain size that you can afford some of the best financial controllers, you know, it's when you're on your own and you're small, you're having to do everything.
Right.
So, and I can guarantee you, you're not good at everything.
No chance. No chance. Nobody is.
Right. And so, how do you try to get by well enough to be able to grow to a point that you can start putting those key people in the right place? And,
Right.
and, and I think that's where the networking comes back in. And it's in today's job market, the people that are really good at what they can do, they get snatched up by the people that make enough money to pay them what they're worth. And that's
Mm-hmm.
hard for a small business owner to, you know, hey, this guy's really worth 25, 35, 45, 50, $55 an hour at what he does, but I can't pay that. You
Mm-hmm.
know, I can't make it go. And, you know, so how do you utilize things like Fiverr? How do you utilize your local talent to say, hey, can you give me 2 hours a week? Can you give me 10 hours a
Right.
week on the side? I know you've got a full-time job. Can I get 10
Right.
hours a week
And
from
that is one thing. That's one thing that I've learned through networking in my time too, because I do three different networking groups during the week. One lunch group, one morning, and two morning groups. But it's one thing you learn is, man, those people help you out, especially if they see something in you. You know what I mean? If they like, know, and trust you, they'll do whatever for you. Most of the time, other than give you their credit card information. But
yeah.
but no, that is what they're looking to do is they want to help you. That's how they got started. With somebody helped them jump off the porch, or do that just a little bit better. Like I have in one of my networking groups, we have a chiropractor and a massage therapist that the massage guy had worked for him for 15 years, was his, one of his right-hand man at his office. And then one day he told him, he's like, look, man, I think I want to do this. And he goes, well, you're already certified. All right, go get certified in those other 2 types of massage and take off and let's do it. And I think he's been in it for 13 years since then, and local in our town, and everybody goes to his massage parlor, just like for him and all of the people that work in there, just because they're great people and people wanted to help him.
Right.
Well, that's the massive thing, because like I can definitely say that networking has helped me out a ton, just because I get out in the world and people get to see me. And it's also, when I walk in at 25, they're like, man, you can get up and give a 60-second pitch about what you do. And he's like, there's 40 and 50-year-olds that can't do this right now, that are getting up here and stuttering and doing all this up here, and you can tell they're not prepared. And I'm like, huh. My first networking meeting, it really shocked me. He goes, our sales director, he looked at me, he goes, just know that that's not what you wanted. You don't want to look like that. And I was like, what you mean? He goes, you want to look like you're prepared. He's like, you're young, so they're already judging you. And I was like, you know what? That's right. And then I'll get up and people always come up, shake my hand, like, man, we got the young ones in here that got good energy. And I'm like, I'm gonna be starving if I ain't got energy.
That's right. That's right.
But no, man, Robert, you're like the perfect person for the podcast. It's called Burn the Ship. You burned the ship. You literally went through a business, left a stable income and job, great benefits from the government, and then went and started off on your own branch in the world, and it's super awesome what you did. But kind of tell the people what that emotion was like when you fully kind of left your business and went into ImproMech and went full into running your own business.
Right. Well, I don't think today's entrepreneur has gotten this, as a buzzword nowadays, but it's not for everybody. And
90%.
It's a lot of emotional highs and a lot of emotional lows. It's it's a ton of work. And I grew up as a farm boy, so most people that know me, one thing they're always fascinated about is how much I work. And I've worked on my diet and a bunch of different stuff just so I can keep the ability to do the workload that I have, because my normal week's 75 hours, and sometimes I'll put in 90. And right. But my average week across most all weeks is 75 to 80 hours. I mean, and I've done that for a long, long time.
Right.
And I've always heard, hey, if you work really, really hard at something, it'll always work out. And while I do believe that working really hard at something gives you the best opportunity for it working out, it doesn't mean it'll always work out. So you have to be emotionally prepared, to be able to handle, coming in 1 month and you find out that you've got like, when I was young in business, I got like a $10,000 job. And I was like, holy cow, that was by far the biggest thing that I ever got. And it was like, that was great. And then you get into that job and you realize you got a $10,000 screw up.
Mm-hmm.
How do you, what do you do with that? You're fixing to drain your bank account because you messed up. It was your mistake.
Right.
How to have the grit and the fortitude to work through it when you can't see the other side,
Right.
And there's a reason in business, some of the statistics are for every 10 businesses that are started in 10 years, only one of those businesses will be left. And
Agreed.
In 10 more years after that, of the ones that were left, of those 10 more that were made it through the first 10, only one of those will be left in the next 20 years. And the reason is it's hard. You're not guaranteed. Just because somebody shows you on Instagram, on a YouTube short, just do this and it's all going to work out. It's so easy, passive income. I said, the only passive income is out there is like investing in the S&P 500.
Yeah, yeah, yes, yes, yes. Yes.
And so being prepared for the emotional highs and lows, being stubborn enough to not give up. One of the things, a guy that's local here, I mean, he's probably 40 per plus million revenue, uh, very good size, 25, 30, 35 people employed. You know, one thing he always told me, he said, you just don't never give up. He said, that's the
Absolutely.
one
No, yeah.
thing that you can't do. He said, it's going to be hard. It's going to be tough. You just can't give up.
Mm-hmm.
And those times, luckily for me, it's much harder to run a business at my age than it will be at your age, because I already have obligations. You know, I have a wife, I have kids. You know, luckily for me now, my kids are all out of the house. They're, you know, but when I was first starting, that's one of the reasons I didn't leave my job just
Right.
right off, was because I knew I had obligations and I knew I was going to fulfill my obligations no matter what. And
Right.
I was not only gambling with my life, I was gambling with theirs too.
Absolutely.
And so uh, it made me have a different perspective. And now that, you know, it's more or less me and my wife owns a couple of coffee shops, and she went from a dental hygienist to jumping off into doing coffee shops. And we have some commercial rental that we're trying to get through. And a lot of people, I have a number of different irons in the fire, because that goes back to my Achilles heel, because I'm eternally curious about everything. So I'm always like, hey, what's that? That's shiny. Let me run after that. And you need to
Right.
focus.
Exactly.
You
Is that
need to,
hot? I'm gonna touch it just to see if it is or not.
yeah, and
That's
you
how
need,
I'm very similar to the same way, you know, and especially I see a young version of myself and, you know, a younger version of you and me. Just because it's kind of how you're talking about it. It's just kind of how I think, very similar to what I think about day to day. I'm very curious. I'm gonna check it out. You can tell me what it is, but I'm gonna find out for myself. You know what I
right,
mean? I still got to find out for myself if that's something. You might have hated it. That's your perspective.
right.
Mine's gonna be different. We're all different. You know what I mean?
That's right.
I like Alabama. You might like Georgia.
Right. Yeah.
You know?
Well, that's interesting that you bring it up, because that's one of the things I constantly talk to my employees and other people about, is just what you brought up right there. Not to jump the subject from the emotion,
No, yeah, it's all good.
but is one thing that drives me nuts is I've always kind of been that open to other people's opinions, and I think for an entrepreneur, it is even, you need to be open. It does not mean that you need to jump on every shiny thing that comes by, but you need to be open. Uh,
Absolutely.
because what drives me more nuts than anything is like I hate politics. I actually, you know, but politics nowadays, where 20 years ago you could sit down, if you were a Republican, and you could sit down with a Democrat and you could have a conversation.
Yeah.
And at the end of the conversation, I think you're wrong. You think I'm wrong. Let's go get something to eat. And
Now you get the number one sign.
yeah, I mean, it's like, you can't, if you disagree with me, then you no longer can even be my friend. You can't associate with me. I don't want to be around you. And with an
Right.
entrepreneur, you're not never going to know everything, and you need to be open.
Right.
You don't need to be so swayed by the wind that you're just blown back and forth, but
Right.
you got to be able to test it, to see, to understand it, because what you've got to get good at is knowing what's true and what's not true, what's going to work for you and what's not going to work for you, what's going to work inside your business and what's not going to work inside your business. And those that
Right.
get good at that early, their business can grow way faster. And I mean,
Right.
a lot of this I'm seeing in retrospect.
Right, yeah, because you're living what you're talking about, though. That's something different. You know what I mean? You're living proof of these things.
Right. So I mean, I can sit down. I've always tried to find like people that were above me in whatever level they may be,
And that's the smartest thing you can do as a human being, to learn. Like, how you gonna learn from somebody that's on the side? You know what I mean? You can learn something from them about life, but you might not learn about business.
Right, right, and that's the thing, and being able to separate that, because I'm probably an introvert because I work so much. I don't socialize very often. I mean, I get up at 4 o'clock in the morning. I try to be at work between 5 and 5:30, and I try to leave by 7. And sometimes, like last night, I left at 9:30 coming home, and then I go to bed and I start it all over again. And I do that usually 6 days a week. And but when you're doing that and you've got to be open to those ideas of those people, because just because they're really bad at one thing doesn't make them really bad at everything. And it's okay to it's okay to I'm trying to say exactly how I want to say this. It's okay to have somebody that's really good at X,
Right.
and you can't even stand them about Y.
Yeah, absolutely. I see it all the time.
Right, and that's okay. Take what people know and do well at, and try to understand that and try to figure it out, because there's so many opportunities. I'm an eternal optimist, and I believe that everybody has something to offer,
Right.
and so how do you reach out and glean that knowledge from them, and you can leave the rest of it. You don't have to. Just because I associate with this person does not make me just like that person in every way,
Right.
And a lot of times that's what happens. And because I've just seen so many small business, I'm mad with such and such, and so I don't. Well, you know, there's something that they're doing is right. If anybody's been in business for any amount of time, there's something that they're doing right. Now, there may be 101 things they're doing wrong, but there's something they're doing right. And it's, when you get good at picking through that, that's going to make you a lot better in your own business, picking through, okay, this is what I'm actually doing wrong. This is what I'm doing right. How do I either figure out how to do this right, or how do I figure out how to get somebody that knows how to do that right?
Right.
And being okay with bringing that person in, because you may not like them the way they do this over here, but that's okay.
Right.
You're not hiring them to do that. You want them to do, you want them to do B, not A.
Exactly.
And so that's just entrepreneurs and small business owners trying to understand what they believe success is and what their goals are, and being realistic with that. Can go back to what we talked about, that emotional stress and strain. What are you willing to, how much of that are you willing to tolerate?
Right.
And what do you want to do with it? And what do you think about success? Going back to, just because some of these big names you read on these podcasts and on these shows.
I see, that's my go-to is always your Gary V's and Mark Cuban's. I'm like, they tell you the cliche things of hard work and dedication will get you where you want to go, and that is dang right, and that is true in anything you do in life. It doesn't matter if you want to bicycle up a hill or if you want to learn how to ride a skateboard. Hard work and dedication will get you to where you get decently good at it, but that doesn't mean you're God-gifted enough to be great at it. Not everybody's going to be great at everything.
No, and that's exactly right. And you've got to figure out, like, I think some of it gets hyped, and it's like, okay, I want to build a $100 million business. I want to build a $500 million business. I want to build $10 million business. Most people are not even capable to handle that.
Most of them people ain't even capable to handle 50K.
Right. And most of them, if they give an example, I had a local business owner that I know personally. He doesn't have anybody to the follow up after he's gone. There's nobody there. Kids don't want it, yada, yada. He's getting older. But I mean, it's a massive business. It's very big. It employs a lot of people all around, Georgia. I mean, for me, let me put it like that. It's not,
Right.
I don't know his gross revenue, but I know he has like 20 something people in this location, 10 in that location, 15. And, he's got them spread out all over the place.
Right.
And somebody made the comment and says, well, you need to go in and take that business over. I said, first thing, I have no wish, no, I said, I've talked to him enough. I have a small amount of the idea of the headache that he deals with every day. And
Right.
it's not me. I
Right.
wouldn't do it. I couldn't do it. I don't want to do it.
Absolutely.
And a lot of people just have this idea about success is that make the most money that you possibly can make. And they think that these people that have made it big just magically made it happen and that it would be so easily to take over when most people would not even have a clue how to take over a $350,000 gross revenue business a year, much less
Right.
something that was doing 50 or 100 million.
Right. Every day. And that's one of those things that it's just because of the ignorance of us as human beings, because we don't know. Most people don't know, and then they don't care to, well, just back to the quote of master of all trades, or a jack of all trades, master of none. Everybody thinks that about themselves. It don't matter who they are, if they're the highest on the totem pole or the bottom. They all think that, and to a fault for some people. And
Right.
me, one of them. I'm hard headed. I was a college athlete. I thought I had the world made my palm of my hands. And then I get in the real world and I'm like, I don't know nothing.
Yeah.
Sit there, have to learn. But some people aren't humble about it, and they're just like, oh, I'll figure it out, or oh, they don't know nothing, and they make it their whole life, and they're like, next thing you know, they're working at 80 years old, and they're like, what happened?
Right.
And
And it's all gets back to that idea of what you think success is. And for a lot of people, having your success may be working a great job and putting up a great retirement. And then at some point in time, you leave that job and you go fishing for the rest of your life. And, that's what you want to do. Great.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. But a lot of people that I found, some people they don't even really know what they want, because they would do that. And then 2 weeks after they retire, they're bored of fishing.
Right.
What's the, I think it was on Chris Williams, and he was talking about, the New York, businessman went to like the Caribbean island or whatnot, and there was a guy there that was just he fished a little bit in the morning and go play his guitar the rest of the afternoon and spend time with his family. And the businessman, basically said, hey, what you need to do is you need to go and you need to get your buddies and y'all go get you can get a bunch of fish and y'all can sell them back in the United States. And he said, why would I want to do that? He says, so that, you can start paying them and you can back out and you can grow the business even bigger, so you can sell more fish and make more money and to do that. And he said, well, why would I want to do that? And it keeps going on and on. But the basis of the story, he says at the end, he says, so then one day you can have enough money and you can retire and you can come back and fish a little bit and spend time with your family and play your guitar.
Right.
The very thing that he had all along, he was not, it made no sense to give that up if that's what you want to do. And so knowing yourself well enough to understand, what you will feel like success means to you, that you can go out and try to obtain that in such a way that you can feel successful doing that. And that for me, just the next new accomplishment, the next thing that I didn't think I could do that I actually got accomplished. And the next challenge, that's, a lot of times how much can I I reckon it's like a Jordan Peterson quote where he said, you know, you want to try to see how much responsibility you can bear, because that's what makes you have a better life and more fulfilled life, is taking on as much responsibility that you can actually bear, and uh, and you have the you get the fulfillment of accomplishing that responsibility.
Right.
And for different people, that's just different things.
Absolutely.
And so
Absolutely.
knowing that, and trying to know what you're capable, I won't say capable of, because I think you always want to push a little farther past than what you think you're capable of.
Absolutely.
But being able to do that, and knowing it. So you may be the business owner that, I want to run an HVAC business. I want one person to help me, and I want to do the work, and that's what I want to do. And if that's what you want to do, great.
Right.
If you're not prepared to manage people, if you're not prepared to manage teams, if you're not prepared to, then growing it to 20 plus people and dealing with that headache, it's a completely different mindset. And
Absolutely.
uh, and sometimes I've found, and this would be interesting to hear from you, of is I'm a technical person. So I grew up as a mechanic, and you know, so I have
I'm a
this,
tinkerer. I call him. I'm not a mechanic, but I'm a tinkerer.
yeah.
If that goes for you.
Well, the idea is you're a technical person, and sometimes that's the very thing that holds me back, is because I want to get in there and do it.
Right.
I want to
And
get in.
me as well. So mine is. I was really thinking about this yesterday actually, because me and a couple of coworkers, we was playing in a golf tournament yesterday morning, till about 3:30 yesterday for the college over here for their sales program. But I was thinking about that in my mind, because mine is, I'm very technical, and if I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna do it.
Right.
And I'm gonna go all out with it. Like if I'm gonna have a lifted truck, I'm gonna have the most badass lifted truck on the
Right.
town. Or if I got a nice car, it's gonna have the nicest sounding exhaust motor, whatever to it.
Yeah.
You know, that's me. It's always been me. But my thing is, if I can't do it when I'm ready to do it, I might never do it. You know, or I get frustrated with people around me. Like if it has to do with like a group of people that are helping me out do it or whatever. If I'm there to do it, I'm very OCD on getting it done then, because I know I can do it and I know I got the means to do it. We'd take us an hour if we put our head down and do it.
Right.
And then somebody wants to drag it out to be 4 hours. Like my granddad, we got a 1,100 acre farm, and we get out there, and I'm like, man, because he's like telling me how to build a chicken coop. I'm like, Fred, I've built 50 of them. You gonna tell me how to do it? I'm the one putting it together. You're just sitting on the tractor yelling at me. You know, I'm not listening to this.
That's right.
But it's things like that'll, you know, I feel it's a lot of people, but that stuff right there, I'm very technical. So once I'm getting it, once I'm there, don't try to throw me off of what's already going on in my realm.
Right. And I found sometimes that hinders me as a business person.
Yeah.
Because I'm going in, instead of, sometimes I have to catch myself, instead of training my guys to do that, and try to do that to the standard that I feel like is my standard, that I
Right.
want, that I'm comfortable with. I kind of try to live by the 80-20 rule. You know, if it's 80 can meet the standard by 80%, then that's good enough for now. We can try to get that little bit of extra, a little bit extra, and a little bit extra, because you end up spending way too much time, way too much effort on it. But
Absolutely.
I find myself, instead of allowing or training people to do it, sometimes jumping in and getting it done myself. Well, if you're going to build a business, you can't do everything.
Absolutely.
And that's one of the hangups that I have. And I was talking with a guy the other day, and he said, you know, I had done a job for him, and they were kind of, well, we were talking about it, and they were kind of going back and forth because it was a job they were paying me to do. And they basically said, well, you didn't really get done what we wanted you to do. And it was because the job, it was a very technical job, and they wanted me to do the higher level, trying to clean up some work that they were doing. But I was constantly getting caught up in, hey, fix this issue. Hey, fix that issue. Come over here and get this done. And I was not able to kind of do the high level work because I was getting bogged down in doing the day-to-day work.
Right, absolutely.
And that's what happens a lot of times in business if you're a technical person. And one of the things that he said that kind of rung out to me, he said, the reason I don't do any of it, he said, one, he says, because I can't do what you do. He said,
right,
I just can't do it. And he says, but he said, it's also helpful for me not to be able to do it because I have to make sure that other people are doing it. And that's the way I grow, is that sometimes I think it's a blessing and a curse, not to be able to do something, because then it forces you to find people that can do that for you. And that's the way you scale. You're not going to scale doing everything yourself. And that's a hard thing when a technical person takes on a business, is they're capable of doing most every job in there, and they're capable of doing it well enough.
Yeah, the problem is just getting yourself to hire those people out to do it, or train them to do it.
Or train them to do it.
Absolutely. But man, Robert, it's been awesome talking with you, man. Tell the people where to find you.
ImproMech.com, www.ImproMech.com. I'm on LinkedIn. I don't do a ton of social media and anything like that, because my customer base is more face to face. But reach out to me anywhere. Fordham at ImproMech.com. We're always more than willing to look at new projects, and we focus in the school bus realm, and we focus around air conditioning, but we also do small projects for other small manufacturing projects. So yeah, that's probably the best way to reach me, just by email, or go to our website, and I think it's info@impromech.com, and you can reach out to me. Great time talking with you today. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Yeah, we're gonna link Robert's socials down below, or his website, and then his LinkedIn down below, so you guys go check him out. Super awesome. It's one of our longer podcasts. I've had a great time talking with you. It's been awesome.
All right, well, I appreciate your time.